The phone rang on a Tuesday evening while I was microwaving leftover pasta. Rick Pierce. That's me. 47 years old, alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Detroit, watching my dinner spin behind glass like my life had been spinning for the past 3 years. The screen lit up with my son's name, Julian. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. I hadn't heard from him in 8 months. Dad. His voice came smooth, practiced, like he'd rehearsed this call. How are you? Fine. I pulled the steaming container out, set it on the counter. The pasta looked as appetizing as cardboard. What do you want, Julian? He laughed, that corporate laugh he'd perfected somewhere between business school and selling his soul. Can't a son call his father just to talk? Sure, but you don't. Before we go any further, take a second to subscribe, hit the hype button, and like the video. It really helps the channel grow. And tell us in the comments, what would you do in this situation? A pause. I could almost hear him recalibrating, adjusting his approach like he was working a difficult client. You're right. I've been distant. That's actually why I'm calling. Aria and I want to make things right. We're thinking of spending a weekend in Chicago. Really reconnect, as a family. Aria, my daughter-in-law, 23 years old with a law degree from Northwestern and eyes like a calculator running numbers. They'd been married 2 years, and I'd seen her maybe 5 times. Each time she looked at me like I was a balance sheet that didn't add up. When? I asked, though I already knew this was a mistake. Everything with Julian had been a mistake since his mother passed. Next weekend, we'll get a nice hotel, see the city, do some father-son bonding. Our treat. I almost laughed. Our treat. Julian was a business consultant who wore expensive suits and drove a leased BMW he couldn't actually afford. His treat meant my wallet, always had. I'll think about it, I said, taking a bite of pasta that tasted like regret. Dad. His tone shifted, softer, more vulnerable. The voice he used to use when he was 10 and wanted something. I know things haven't been great between us. Since Mom passed, since you remarried, I handled it poorly. But we're family. That has to mean something, right? The words hit exactly where he intended. My ex-wife, Julian's mother, had been gone 5 years, taken by a drunk driver on a rainy October night when she was just 41 years old. I'd remarried a year later to a woman named Christine who seemed kind until the ring was on her finger. The marriage lasted 11 months before she left, taking half of what little I had left after the business collapsed. Julian treated my remarriage like the ultimate betrayal, like I desecrated his mother's memory by trying not to drown in loneliness. Fine, I heard myself say, hating the weakness in my voice. Send me the details. Great. This is going to be amazing, Dad. We'll make it special, I promise. We really want to reconnect. Aria's been saying we need to spend more time with you. I bet she has, I thought. Love you, Dad. He hung up before I could respond. I stood there holding my phone, steam rising from my forgotten pasta, knowing I'd just agreed to be used again. But some pathetic part of me still hoped, still wanted to believe my son could be the boy I remembered, before everything fell apart, before the business failed, before his mother was gone, before I became nothing more than a disappointment he had to manage. I threw the pasta in the trash and poured myself a whiskey instead. Outside my window, Detroit was getting dark, streetlights flickering on one by one. I'd moved here after the divorce, after losing the house, after losing everything that mattered. The apartment was cheap and forgettable, which matched exactly how I felt most days. My phone buzzed. A text from Julian with hotel details. The Grand Lux Hotel in downtown Chicago, 5 stars, luxury accommodations. I looked up the rates online and felt my stomach drop. $300 a night minimum, times 3 rooms, times 2 nights, plus meals, plus whatever else they had planned. I checked my bank account. The number stared back at me like an accusation. I could afford it, barely, if I didn't eat much next month, if nothing unexpected happened, if I kept living this small, careful life where every dollar was calculated and every pleasure was weighed against future suffering. I should have said no. Any sane person would have said no. But I wasn't sane. I was a father who missed his son, and that made me the easiest mark in the world. The Grand Lux Hotel rose like a glass monument in downtown Chicago, all marble and crystal and doormen in white gloves who looked at my 10-year-old Honda Civic like it was a disease. Julian and Aria waited in the lobby, designer luggage at their feet, looking like they belonged in a magazine spread about successful young couples. She wore a cream blazer that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He'd gained weight since I'd last seen him, his face fuller, more satisfied with itself and the world it inhabited. Dad! Julian embraced me, and over his shoulder I caught Aria's quick assessment of my worn jacket, my discount jeans, my scuffed shoes. Her smile was flawless and empty, the kind of smile lawyers practice in mirrors. "You made it. How was the drive?" "Long. 4 hours of highway and anxiety, wondering what this weekend would really cost me." "Richard." Aria kissed my cheek, her perfume expensive and overwhelming. "So wonderful to finally spend quality time together. We've been looking forward to this for weeks." The check-in took 20 minutes. Julian handled everything with practiced ease, chatting with the receptionist like they were old friends, making jokes that made her blush. She was young and pretty and clearly charmed by his attention. When she finally slid the keycards across the marble counter, Julian glanced at me expectantly. "The reservation is under Pierce," he said casually. 3 rooms, 2 nights." The receptionist's fingers danced over her keyboard. "Yes, Mr. Pierce. That will be $4,200. My heart stopped. 4,000. For 2 nights. Julian's smile never wavered. He simply waited, like this was the most natural thing in the world. Aria examined her nails. I pulled out my credit card, the one that was already close to maxed out, the one I used for emergencies, and apparently my son's idea of family bonding qualified. "Here." "Thanks, Dad." Julian took the keys like I'd handed him loose change. "You're the best. This is going to be such a great weekend." Aria touched my arm, her hand cool and smooth. "This is so generous of you, Richard. We really appreciate it. Family is everything, isn't it?" They walked toward the elevators, leaving me to grab my own bag. The receptionist avoided my eyes as she processed the charge. $4,000. I'd just spent $4,000 for the privilege of being tolerated by my own son. Our rooms were on the 15th floor. Mine was smaller, overlooking an alley and a dumpster. Theirs were suites with lake views and balconies, the kind of rooms where rich people pretended their lives had meaning. I unpacked my single bag in 5 minutes, hung up my 2 shirts, and sat on the bed staring at the wall. What was I doing here? That night we had dinner at the hotel restaurant, a place called Aurelius where the menu didn't list prices and the waiters wore tuxedos like they were attending a funeral for your bank account. Julian ordered wine like he understood it, swirling and sniffing and using words like notes of oak and earthy undertones. Aria asked questions about my life with the careful attention of someone conducting a deposition, each query designed to extract information while revealing nothing. "So, you're fully retired now?" she asked, cutting her steak into precise, identical pieces. "Yes." "No pension from the company in Canada?" "The company collapsed, Aria. There was no pension. There was barely enough to pay our debts." "Right, of course." She exchanged a look with Julian, some silent communication that excluded me entirely. "And you're living off Social Security now?" "And some savings." "Must be difficult," Julian said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "After running your own business, being so independent, making all those decisions, now having to watch every penny, living in that little apartment." "How do you manage?" I set down my fork, the sound sharp against the china. "What is this, Julian?" "What?" He looked genuinely confused, or at least he pretended to. "I'm just concerned about you, Dad. You're not getting any younger. Have you thought about what happens if you get sick? If you need care, we worry about you." "I'm 47, not 80. But planning ahead is important." Aria leaned forward, her lawyer face fully engaged now. "We've actually been discussing it, Julian and I. We want to help, maybe look into some financial arrangements that could protect you, make sure you're taken care of properly." "Protect me from what?" "From making mistakes," she said simply, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "At a certain age, people's judgment can become impaired. Diminished capacity, they call it. We just want to make sure you're taken care of, that no one takes advantage of you." The waiter appeared with the check in a leather folder. Julian didn't even look at it, just slid it across the white tablecloth to me. $1,200 for 1 meal. For food I could barely taste through my anger. I paid. Again, watched my credit limit shrink. Watched my son and his wife exchange another look of satisfaction. Back in my room, I stood at the window looking down at the street 15 floors below. Cars moved like insects. People walked with purpose toward lives that made sense. My son wanted me declared incompetent. My daughter-in-law was already building a legal case, probably had been for months, and I just spent $6,000 to watch them sharpen their knives on my dignity. I should have felt destroyed, broken, ready to give up. Instead, I felt something cold and calculating settle into my chest, something that had been sleeping for a long time, since the business collapsed, since I lost everything. A part of me I thought had been gone forever, the part that built something from nothing, that competed and won. It was waking up, and it was hungry, Sunday morning, checkout time. Julian and Aria had already left, off to brunch with friends in the city. No invitation for me, no goodbye, just a text message at 7 in the morning. Thanks again for everything, Dad. Let's do this again soon. You're the best. I wheeled my bag to the front desk where an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes processed my departure. Her name tag said Helen, and she had the gentle manner of someone who'd seen everything hotels had to offer, the good, the bad, and the desperate. Mr. Pierce? She looked up from her computer, her expression shifting to something I couldn't quite read. Before you go, I have something for you, something important. I already paid for everything. God knows I had. No, it's not about payment. She reached under the counter and pulled out an envelope. Expensive paper, cream-colored, my name written across it in elegant script. Are you Richard Pierce, son of Harold Pierce? The floor seemed to tilt. The lobby sounds faded. What did you say? Your father, Harold Pierce? He stayed here often before he passed 3 months ago. Her voice softened. He was a regular guest, almost lived here toward the end. He left this letter with me personally, with very specific instructions. If his son Richard ever visited the hotel, I was to give it to him immediately. My hands shook as I took the envelope. Harold Pierce, my father, the man who divorced my mother when I was 8 years old, remarried a woman with money, and built a new life that didn't include me. We'd spoken maybe a dozen times in 40 years. Awkward phone calls on holidays where neither of us knew what to say. I didn't even know he'd passed away. Nobody had called me. Nobody thought I should know. I'm so sorry for your loss, Helen said gently. He was a good man. Difficult, but good. He talked about you sometimes toward the end. I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. I found a chair in the lobby, sank into it, and opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter in my father's precise handwriting. I recognized it from the birthday cards he'd stopped sending when I turned 12, and several legal documents with official stamps and signatures. Richard, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Good. I was a terrible father to you, and I won't insult your intelligence by pretending otherwise. I left your mother. I left you. I chose my new life and my new family, and I justified it with 1,000 excuses that meant nothing. You were 8 years old, and I abandoned you. There's no redemption for that. But I watched you over the years, kept track from a distance. I knew about your business in Canada, how you built it from nothing. I knew when it collapsed, when the economy turned and the clients disappeared. I knew about your wife, about Julian. I knew about your remarriage and your divorce. I watched it all from a distance, too much of a coward to reach out, to help, to be the father you deserved. I know what Julian is planning to do to you. Your son inherited my worst qualities, Richard. The greed, the selfishness, the ability to view people as resources to be exploited. His wife is worse. She's smart enough to make it legal, to wrap cruelty in paperwork and call it protection. They've been researching competency proceedings for 6 months. They want everything you have, and they want you powerless to stop them. They want to take the last shreds of your dignity and call it love. So I'm giving you power. The Grand Lux Hotel is yours. I bought it 12 years ago and renovated it over the past 5 years, spent $40 million making it what it is today. It's worth $38 million now, generates $4 million annually in profit. I put it in an irrevocable trust with you as the sole beneficiary. The paperwork is enclosed. The hotel is yours, Richard, all of it. There's also the car collection at my estate in Lake Forest. 15 vehicles, mostly vintage Ferraris and Porsches. Another $4 million in assets. Investment accounts with Merrill Lynch, about $8 million. The properties in Florida and Colorado. It's all yours. Every dollar, every asset, everything I should have given you 40 years ago in love and attention, I'm giving you now in steel and concrete and numbers on paper. You're a wealthy man now, Richard, but more importantly, you're free. You have power. You have options. You don't have to be the victim anymore. Do what you want with this information. Forgive them if you can. Embrace them if you're stronger than I ever was. Or make them understand what it costs to treat family as prey. Make them understand that sharks sometimes swim in shallow water. I failed you as a father. I failed you every day of your life. Maybe this makes up for some of that. Maybe not. Probably not. But it's what I have to give. And I'm giving it freely, with no strings attached and no expectations. I'm sorry, son, for everything. Harold. I read it 3 times, then a 4th. The legal documents confirmed everything. Title to the hotel, transfer of trust, account numbers, property deeds. My father, the man who abandoned me, had left me everything, had watched my son plot against me and given me the weapons to fight back. I looked up. Helen was watching me with concern. Mr. Pierce, are you all right? Should I call someone? This hotel, I said slowly, my voice not quite working right. The Grand Lux. Who owns it? The owner passed away 3 months ago. His son inherited it through a trust. Why do you ask? I stood up, my legs unsteady, the documents clutched in my hand like a winning lottery ticket. Because I'm the son. Her eyes widened, understanding flooding her face. You own the Grand Lux? Apparently. I looked around the lobby with new eyes. The marble floors that cost a fortune to maintain. The crystal chandeliers worth more than houses. The million-dollar artwork on the walls. The staff, the systems, the infrastructure of luxury that generated $4 million a year in pure profit. All mine. And Julian had just made me pay $6,000 to stay in my own hotel. Had brought me here, to this specific place, to humiliate me, to show me how small I was, to demonstrate his power and my weakness. He had no idea what he'd done. The cold thing in my chest wasn't sleeping anymore. It was awake and hungry and ready to teach my son exactly what a mistake looked like, ready to show him what happened when you mistook kindness for weakness, when you confused patience with stupidity. I walked out of the Grand Lux Hotel, my hotel, and got into my Honda Civic. Started the engine, began the drive back to Detroit with my father's letter on the passenger seat. Julian wanted to take everything from me. Instead, I was going to take everything from him. I didn't tell Julian about the inheritance. Not yet. That would be like showing your cards before the river. I'd learned poker from my father before he left. One of the few useful things he'd taught me. The best hands are played quiet. I spent the next 3 weeks buried in paperwork, meeting with lawyers and accountants, understanding exactly what my father had left me. The numbers were staggering. The hotel alone generated $4 million in annual profit, more in good years. The investments were diversified and solid, managed by professionals who knew what they were doing. The cars weren't just vehicles. They were appreciated assets, investments that gained value while sitting in climate-controlled garages. The Florida property was beachfront. The Colorado property had mountain views and rental income. I was wealthy. More than wealthy. I had the kind of money that changes how people look at you, how they speak to you, what they think you're capable of. But more valuable than any of it was information. My father's files included a private investigator's report on Julian and Aria. Every detail of their lives laid bare in clinical precision, their debts, their schemes, their plans for me. My father had hired someone to watch them for over a year, documenting everything. They were broke. Completely, desperately broke. Julian's consulting business was failing. He'd lost his 3 major clients over the past year due to incompetence and missed deadlines. He owed money to everyone, credit cards, personal loans, the leasing company for his BMW. His expensive suits were bought on credit he couldn't service. Aria's law firm had let her go 6 months ago for ethical violations involving client funds. Nothing criminal, but enough to get her quietly pushed out. She'd been job hunting ever since, her Northwestern degree meaning nothing without references. They'd been living on credit cards, bouncing between apartments when rent came due, staying one step ahead of collections agencies and angry landlords. The condo I'd visited, the one with the lake view and modern furniture, they were already 2 months behind on rent, facing eviction. The furniture was rented, even the artwork on the walls was leased. Their entire life was a performance. A desperate, expensive performance. And they needed my money to keep the show running. When simple manipulation didn't work fast enough, when they realized I wasn't just going to hand over my assets willingly, they'd decided to go legal. Aria had already drafted the competency petition, 50 pages of legal reasoning for why I should be declared incapable of managing my own affairs. They just needed a few more documented incidents of impaired judgment before filing, a few more expensive dinners, a few more irrational purchases they could point to in court. The weekend in Chicago had been their first step. Get me on record spending money irresponsibly. Make me seem confused, forgetful, easily manipulated. Build their case brick by brick. I sat in my apartment, my shabby rented apartment that I could now replace with a mansion, and planned. The engineer in me saw it as a problem requiring elegant solution. The father in me saw it as something much darker, something that tasted like revenge and justice mixed together until you couldn't tell them apart. My phone rang. Julian. Hey, Dad, how have you been? Fine. I put him on speaker and continued reading through the investigator's report. There were photos of Julian meeting with elder law attorneys, photos of Aria researching competency proceedings at the public library. They'd been thorough. Listen, Aria and I were thinking, why don't you come visit us for dinner Friday? Our place, home cooking, just family, nothing fancy. Nothing fancy meant I should bring something fancy. You moved? Last I knew, you were in that apartment in Lincoln Park. A pause. Brief, telling. Yeah, we upgraded. New place in Gold Coast. Closer to Aria's firm. Better neighborhood. The firm that fired her. The neighborhood they couldn't afford. The apartment they'd be evicted from in 2 weeks. What's the address? I asked, though I already knew. It was in the investigator's report, along with copies of their eviction notice. He gave it to me, his voice warm and false. I'll be there, I said. Great. Oh, and Dad? Could you maybe bring some wine? Something nice? You know, like that bottle you brought in Chicago. You always had such good taste with wine. He wanted me to pay for dinner at his own house. Wanted me to bring expensive wine to the apartment he couldn't afford. The performance continued. Of course, I said. I'll bring something special. You're the best, Dad. See you Friday. Love you. I hung up and opened my laptop. Time to start moving pieces into position. Time to let Julian think he was winning while I built the trap around him. I called Patricia Flores, the lawyer who now worked for me. I need you to prepare something, a complete asset protection strategy, and I need you to pull all the public records on Julian Pierce and Aria Pierce. Everything. Credit reports, court filings, liens, judgments. I want to know every dollar they owe and everyone they've lied to. I can have it by Thursday, she said. Good. And Patricia? I need it done quietly. Nobody can know I'm looking into them. Understood. I opened my father's letter again. Read it one more time. Make them understand what it costs to treat family as prey. I was going to do exactly that. I was going to teach Julian and Aria a lesson they would never forget. A lesson about consequences. About what happens when you mistake patience for weakness, when you confuse love with stupidity. They wanted to take everything from me. Instead, I was going to show them what nothing looked like. The condo was impressive if you didn't know the truth. 20th floor, lake view through floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture that screamed expensive taste and temporary circumstances. Aria answered the door in a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Her smile was sharp as legal briefs and twice as calculated. Richard, come in, come in. We're so glad you could make it. She took the wine from my hands. A $300 bottle from my father's collection, something he'd been saving for a special occasion. Her eyes widened slightly when she read the label. This is incredibly generous. You really didn't have to. Only the best for family, I said, stepping inside. The apartment smelled like roasted garlic and desperation. On the walls hung abstract paintings they'd rented, probably chosen to seem sophisticated. The furniture was sleek and uncomfortable, the kind designers love and humans tolerate. Julian appeared from the kitchen, apron on, playing the role of domestic success. Dad, welcome to our home. He embraced me, and I felt him assess the wine over my shoulder. His grip tightened slightly when he saw the label. Wow, this is a serious bottle. Chateau Margaux 2015. You really splurged. I wanted to, I said simply. You're my son. We're celebrating family. I watched them exchange a look. They thought I was making their case for them. Irrational spending by a man on a fixed income. They'd probably testify about this dinner in court, talk about how I spent hundreds on wine I couldn't afford while living in a shabby apartment. Perfect evidence of diminished capacity. Dinner was salmon and asparagus, prepared competently enough. They asked about my life with practiced interest, questions designed to sound caring while extracting information. How was I sleeping? Was I taking any medications? Had I been feeling forgetful? Each question a potential weapon for later. I answered vaguely, watching them work their way toward whatever the real agenda was tonight. They were building toward something. I could feel it in the careful orchestration of the evening, the way Aria kept checking her watch like they were on a schedule. It came with dessert. Dad, we need to talk seriously. Julian set down his fork, his face arranged in concerned son mode, the expression probably practiced in mirrors. Aria and I have been worried about you. Really worried. That weekend in Chicago, the money you spent, it seemed confused, impulsive, not like the careful man who raised me. I wanted to treat my family. But it was $6,000, Aria said gently, her lawyer voice emerging now. That's not reasonable for someone in your financial situation. It's not rational. It suggests impaired judgment, possibly early-stage cognitive decline. We've been researching it, talking to specialists. There it was. The language from the competency petition, the words she'd use in court. They'd been preparing this conversation, this intervention, like lawyers prep a witness. Are you saying I'm senile? I asked calmly, taking a sip of the expensive wine I'd brought. It was excellent, wasted on this moment. Of course not. Julian reached across the table, his hand on mine. Warm, fake. But you're under stress. The business failure, losing Mom, the divorce with Christine. It adds up, Dad. All that trauma, all that loss. It affects people. We think you might benefit from some help managing things. Professional help. What kind of help? Aria pulled out a folder from beneath her chair. Professional, prepared. Probably practiced this reveal too. We've consulted with several elder care specialists and attorneys. They recommend setting up a power of attorney arrangement. Nothing drastic. Just a way to protect you. Julian would manage your finances, make sure bills are paid, investments are handled properly, keep you from making unfortunate decisions that could hurt you. I'm 47 years old. Age isn't the issue, she continued smoothly, opening the folder to show documents already prepared, already printed, just needing my signature. Capacity is mental capacity, and recent behavior suggests your capacity might be diminishing. The impulsive spending, the poor financial decisions, the isolation. These are all warning signs, Richard. We're trying to help you before you hurt yourself worse. I looked at my son. Really looked at him. Saw the calculation behind the concern, the greed behind the love, the barely concealed triumph in his eyes. He thought he'd won. Thought I was just another mark, another victim of his schemes. No, I said quietly. Dad? No. I stood up, setting my napkin on the table carefully. Thank you for dinner. The salmon was excellent. You've always been good at presentations, Julian, making things look better than they are. Richard, please. Aria stood too, her lawyer face fully engaged now, all pretense of family warmth gone. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. We have documentation, witnesses who'll testify to concerning behavior, bank records, statements from that weekend in Chicago. We're trying to help you before this gets ugly, but we will protect you from yourself if necessary. Is that a threat? It's reality, Julian said, and for the first time his mask cracked completely. I saw the rage underneath, the resentment that had been building for years. You're going to lose everything anyway, Dad. You always do. The business, the marriage, everything you touch turns to garbage. At least this way, it stays in the family. At least this way, someone who actually knows what they're doing will manage your assets. Assets? I smiled, and something in my expression made them both step back. What assets, Julian? What exactly do you think I have that's worth stealing? Aria recovered first, her lawyer training kicking in. Your savings, your Social Security, the small pension. It's not about the amount, Richard. It's about making sure you're taken care of. I walked to the door, turned back. They were standing in their rented living room, surrounded by rented furniture, wearing expensive clothes they couldn't afford, playing roles they could barely sustain. You know what's funny? You think you're so smart, both of you. Business consultant, lawyer. You think you've planned everything, anticipated every move, but you have no idea what's coming. Aria's laugh was cold and confident. What's coming is a competency hearing, in 2 weeks. We already filed the petition this afternoon at 4 p.m. The judge will review our evidence, hear our witnesses, and you'll be declared incompetent. Then everything you have becomes our responsibility. It's already in motion, Richard. This dinner was a courtesy, a chance for you to cooperate, but it's happening either way. Good luck with that. I left them standing there, their confidence complete, their victory assured. I drove back to Detroit in my Honda Civic, back to my shabby apartment, back to my small life that they thought they'd conquered. They had no idea I'd been recording everything, that my phone in my jacket pocket had captured every word, every threat, every admission of their plans, that my lawyers were already preparing counteractions, that in 2 weeks they wouldn't just lose their case, they'd lose everything. The revenge was taking shape, cold, precise, inevitable as mathematics. The competency hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning at 9 a.m. in the Cook County Courthouse, Courtroom 4B, Judge Sandra Martinez presiding. Aria had been thorough. I had to give her credit for that. She'd lined up 3 witnesses, documented my irresponsible spending with bank records and receipts, built a case that looked solid on paper. She'd even gotten a psychologist to write an evaluation based on Julian's descriptions of my behavior. Textbook competency challenge. What she didn't know was that I'd spent 2 weeks systematically destroying the foundation she'd built. I arrived early, dressed in a sharp suit I'd bought specifically for this occasion. Tom Ford, perfectly tailored. The kind of suit that costs $3,000 and announces you're not someone to underestimate. My lawyer, Patricia Flores, was already there, one of the best in Chicago, now on my substantial payroll. She'd come highly recommended by my father's attorneys, a predator in designer heels who smiled as if she were already savoring victory. They're confident, Patricia told me quietly as we stood in the hallway outside the courtroom. Aria's been talking to the courthouse staff like this is already decided. She's young and arrogant, which works in our favor. Good. Let her be confident. Julian and Aria appeared at the far end of the hallway. They stopped when they saw me, saw my suit, saw Patricia beside me with her leather briefcase and courtroom presence. I watched confusion cross their faces. They'd expected me to show up alone, maybe with a public defender if I'd even bothered to lawyer up at all. Dad, Julian approached cautiously. You hired an attorney? Several, actually. Ms. Flores is just handling this particular matter. Aria's eyes narrowed. That suit. How did you afford Patricia Flores? She charges $800 an hour. That's really not your concern, is it? The bailiff called us into the courtroom. It was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and serious, with an American flag in the corner and the seal of Illinois on the wall. Judge Martinez was already seated, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd heard every lie humanity could tell. This is a petition for determination of incapacity, she began, reviewing her papers. Filed by Julian Pierce and Aria Pierce regarding Richard Pierce. Let's hear the petitioner's case. Aria stood, smoothing her skirt, slipping into lawyer mode like putting on armor. Your Honor, thank you. This is a difficult situation for everyone involved. My husband and I love Richard deeply. He's family. But we've become increasingly concerned about his ability to manage his own affairs. Over the past several months, we've witnessed behavior that suggests serious cognitive decline. She presented their evidence methodically. The Chicago weekend where I'd spent $6,000 irresponsibly, the expensive wine I'd brought to dinner, my isolation and poor living conditions despite having resources, bank records showing erratic spending patterns. She made it sound clinical, unavoidable, sad. We have witnesses prepared to testify, she continued, the hotel staff who witnessed concerning behavior, friends who've noticed changes in Richard's decision-making. We're not trying to punish him, Your Honor. We're trying to protect him before he hurts himself financially. Julian testified next, playing the concerned son. He talked about how I'd changed since his mother's passing, how I'd become withdrawn and irrational. He described the Chicago weekend in careful detail, emphasizing my confusion, my willingness to spend money I couldn't afford. He even managed to summon tears. I just want my dad to be safe, he finished, his voice breaking perfectly. I want him to have dignity in his later years. I kept my face neutral. Let them build their case. Let them feel confident. Then it was our turn. Patricia stood like she was born for courtrooms. Your Honor, this petition is not about protecting Richard Pierce. It's about stealing from him, and I can prove it. She presented documents systematically, building a counter-narrative. Julian and Aria's financial situation, their debts, their eviction notices, the timeline of their sudden interest in my well-being coinciding exactly with their financial collapse. They claim Richard spent $6,000 irresponsibly in Chicago, Patricia continued, but they invited him on this trip. They selected the hotel. They encouraged every expense. Why? Because they were building a case, manufacturing evidence of incompetence. She played the recording from the dinner. Aria's voice filled the courtroom. We already filed the petition this afternoon. The judge will review our evidence and you'll be declared incompetent. Then everything you have becomes our responsibility. I watched the color drain from Aria's face. That was taken out of context, she stammered. Was it? Patricia smiled. Let's hear more. Julian's voice next. You're going to lose everything anyway, Dad. You always do. At least this way, it stays in the family. Judge Martinez's expression had gone from neutral to granite. But here's what's truly interesting, Your Honor, Patricia continued. The hotel where this supposedly irresponsible spending occurred, the Grand Lux Hotel in Chicago, Richard Pierce owns it. He inherited it 3 months ago from his late father. It's worth $38 million. The courtroom went silent. Patricia placed more documents on the judge's bench. Richard Pierce isn't experiencing cognitive decline. He's a wealthy man who was being systematically manipulated by his son and daughter-in-law. They isolated him, encouraged spending they could later characterize as irrational, and filed this petition when he refused to simply hand over power of attorney. This isn't about protection, Your Honor. This is about theft. I stood when Patricia nodded to me, addressed the judge directly. Your Honor, I spent $6,000 at my own hotel, unaware at the time that I owned it. My son and daughter-in-law brought me there specifically to create evidence of incompetence. When I discovered my inheritance and refused to give them control of my assets, they filed this petition within hours. I have recordings of them admitting their plans. I have documentation of their financial desperation. This isn't about my capacity. This is about their greed. Judge Martinez looked at Julian and Aria with something approaching disgust. Do the petitioners wish to respond? Aria tried. She argued the recordings were inadmissible, taken without consent. She claimed the financial information was irrelevant to the question of my capacity. She suggested I'd somehow manipulated the evidence, that I was more cunning than incompetent, which proved their point. But her voice lacked conviction now. The confidence was gone. I've heard enough, Judge Martinez said finally. This petition is denied. Mr. Pierce has clearly demonstrated capacity. Furthermore, I'm troubled by what appears to be attempted fraud on this court. Ms. Pierce, as an officer of the court, you should know better. I'm referring this matter to the Illinois Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Commission for review. Aria went white. This hearing is concluded. The petition is dismissed with prejudice. The gavel fell. I walked out of that courtroom with Patricia beside me, leaving Julian and Aria sitting at their table in stunned silence. The first blow had landed. They'd lost their case, lost their credibility, and Aria might lose her law license permanently. But I wasn't done. Not even close. 3 days after the hearing, I invited Julian and Aria to lunch. They came because they had no choice, because their world was collapsing and I was the only person with the power to stop it. We met at a quiet restaurant in downtown Chicago, expensive enough to remind them what they'd lost, but not so ostentatious as to draw attention. They looked terrible. Julian had bags under his eyes, his expensive suit wrinkled like he'd slept in it. Aria's usual polish was gone, replaced by something desperate and raw. They knew what was coming, just not how bad it would be. Thank you for meeting us, Julian said quietly as they sat down. No performance now? No charm. Dad, we need to talk. Yes, we do. A waiter appeared. I ordered wine, nothing expensive this time, just decent, and salmon for myself. They ordered water and picked at the menu like food was an abstract concept they couldn't quite grasp. We're sorry, Aria said finally. Her lawyer composure was crumbling, words coming out rushed and unsteady. What we did was wrong, unforgivable. We were desperate, and we made terrible decisions. But we're begging you, Richard, please, don't destroy us completely. Destroy you? I raised an eyebrow. I'm not destroying you. You destroyed yourselves. Julian leaned forward. The disciplinary commission is investigating Aria. If she loses her license, she'll never work as a lawyer again. My clients have already started dropping me because of the publicity from the hearing. We're losing everything. You were already losing everything, I said calmly. I'm just refusing to be your safety net. We know. He looked down at his hands. We know we don't deserve your help, but I'm your son. That has to mean something. Does it? I took a sip of wine. You were willing to have me declared incompetent, to take everything I had, to leave me with no dignity, no autonomy, no future. And you call that family? We were desperate. So was I. My voice stayed level, but something in it made them both go still. When my business collapsed, when your mother was gone, when Christine left, I was desperate too. But I didn't try to steal from you. I didn't try to destroy you legally. I just quietly suffered and tried to keep going. Aria's eyes were red. We'll do anything. Pay you back somehow. Sign away any claim to your assets. Whatever you want. Just please help us. We're about to be homeless. Julian's car is being repossessed. We have nothing. I know exactly what you have. I've seen the investigators' reports, the debt collectors, the eviction notices. I know everything. I set down my wine glass. And now I'm going to tell you what's going to happen next. They waited, holding hands under the table like children. Nothing, I said. I'm going to do nothing. I won't help you. I won't hurt you further. I won't press charges for fraud or attempted theft. I'll just let natural consequences play out. You'll lose your apartment. Your credit will be destroyed. Aria might lose her license. Your friends will stop calling. And you'll have to figure out how to survive just like everyone else who makes terrible decisions. Dad, I'm not done. I leaned back. I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to tell you why. You need to understand what you did. Not just the legal stuff. The other thing. Julian looked confused. What other thing? You made me hope, I said quietly, and for the first time let the anger show. When you called about Chicago, when you said you wanted to reconnect, some stupid part of me believed you. I thought maybe we could fix things. Maybe you'd grown up. Maybe family could mean something again. And that hope, that was crueler than anything you did afterward. We did want to reconnect, Julian said weakly. No, you wanted my money. You've always wanted something from me. When you were a kid, it was attention your mother couldn't give you because she was so angry at me for failing. Then it was college tuition, then wedding costs, then money for your business. Always something, never just me. The words hung in the air, true and painful. I loved your mother, I continued. Loved her deeply. When she was gone, I didn't know how to be your father anymore, how to bridge that gap. So I tried to give you things instead of presents, money instead of time, and you learned that was all I was good for, all I was worth. Aria was crying now, tears running down her face without sound. So no, I won't help you. Not because I'm cruel, but because you need to learn what it means to have nothing, to be dismissed by the people who should care about you, to feel powerless and small and alone. Maybe then you'll understand what you tried to do to me. I stood up, pulled out cash for my meal. The investigators' reports are being sealed. No one will see them unless you try something like this again. Your debts are your problem. Your careers are your problem. Your lives are your problem. I'm done being your solution. Please, Julian was crying too now. Please, Dad, don't leave us like this. I looked at my son, saw the boy he'd been once, before life made him hard, before my failures taught him that people were resources. For a moment, the cold thing in my chest wavered. Then I remembered his voice on the recording. You're going to lose everything anyway, Dad. You always do. Goodbye, Julian. I walked out of the restaurant, got into my Honda Civic. I still drove it, preferred it to the expensive cars I now owned. Sat in the parking lot for a long time before starting the engine. The revenge should have felt satisfying. Complete, I'd won. They'd lost. Justice was served, but it felt hollow, empty, like I'd won a game that didn't matter. I drove back to Detroit, to my apartment I hadn't yet left despite being able to afford any house in America. Sat in the dark and wondered what my father would think, if he'd approve of how I'd used his gift. If this was what he meant by making them understand. The cold thing in my chest wasn't hungry anymore. It was just tired. But I wasn't done yet. There was one more move to make, one final piece to put in place. 2 weeks later, I called Julian one last time. Meet me at the Grand Lux Hotel tomorrow at noon. Lobby. Be there. He started to ask why, but I hung up. Let him wonder. Let him hope or fear or whatever emotion he had left. I arrived early, dressed casually, and waited in one of the lobby's expensive chairs. Helen, the receptionist who'd given me my father's letter, smiled at me. She knew who I was now. Everyone who worked here did. I'd met with management, learned the operations, started understanding what it meant to own something this significant. Julian appeared exactly at noon, looking worse than before. His suit was the same one from lunch, still wrinkled. He'd lost weight, his face hollow and tired. He approached cautiously, like I might explode. Dad, sit. He sat in the chair across from me. His hands shook slightly. Thank you for calling. I've been hoping you'd reconsider. I'm not giving you money. His face fell. Then why am I here? Because I'm going to tell you something. A truth about our family. About my father, your grandfather. Julian looked confused. I barely knew him. You never talked about him. Because he left me, just like you think I left you. I pulled out the letter, now frayed from being read so many times. He left me this hotel, not because he cared, but because he felt guilty, because he saw you plotting against me and wanted to give me something to fight back with. I didn't... Don't. I held up my hand. Don't lie anymore. I know exactly what you planned, what you did, but that's not the point of this conversation. Then what is? I need you to understand something. When your mother was gone, I remarried fast. Too fast. It was stupid and desperate, and it hurt you. I know that. But I did it because I couldn't handle being alone. Couldn't handle failing her, failing you, failing everything I touched. Julian's expression softened slightly. I was so angry at you. I know, and I deserved that anger. But then I let the anger create distance. Let years pass without trying to fix things, without being your father. And that was worse than the remarriage. That was real abandonment. Why are you telling me this now? I looked around the lobby. My father gave me this hotel thinking I'd use it for revenge, that I'd destroy you financially and feel vindicated. And for a while, that's what I wanted, to make you hurt like you made me hurt. And now? Now I realize revenge is just pain wearing a different suit. It doesn't fix anything, doesn't heal anything. It's just another way of staying broken. I handed him an envelope. He opened it slowly. Inside was a check for $50,000. What is this? Enough to get back on your feet. Pay your debts, keep your car, find a new apartment. Not enough to solve everything, but enough to have options. Julian stared at the check like it might vanish. Why? Because you're my son. Because despite everything, I still remember teaching you to ride a bike, reading you stories at bedtime, watching you graduate high school. Those things were real, even if everything afterward got complicated. I don't deserve this. No, you don't. That's why it's called grace instead of justice. I stood up. But there are conditions? His eyes met mine, wary but listening. You get therapy, both of you. Real therapy, not just crisis counseling. You face what you did and why you did it, and you never, ever contact me about money again. If we have a relationship after this, it's because we're family, not because of what I can give you. And if I refuse the money, then you refuse it. Your choice. But the no-contact rule remains either way. I'm done being your ATM. I'm done being your safety net. If we're going to be father and son again, it has to be because we both want that, not because you need something. Julian looked at the check again, then at me. Something shifted in his face. Shame, maybe, or understanding. I'm sorry, Dad, for all of it. I know, but sorry isn't magic. It doesn't fix things instantly. It's just a starting point. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you let us get this far? You knew what we were planning. Why didn't you stop us earlier? Why let it get to court? I considered the question. Because you needed to fail completely. Needed to hit bottom. If I'd stopped you early, you'd just have tried something else. This way, you learned what desperation really feels like, what it means to have nothing, and maybe that lesson is worth more than $50,000. It is, he said quietly. It really is. I walked toward the exit, stopped, turned back. Julian, I failed you as a father. I know that. I can't change the past, can't undo the distance and the mistakes. But if you want to try building something new, something honest, I'm willing to try. I'd like that. Then cash that check, fix your life, and in 6 months, call me. We'll have dinner, no expectations, no agendas, just dinner. I will, I promise. I nodded and left him sitting there in my hotel, holding a check that represented grace he hadn't earned and couldn't pay back. The cold thing in my chest was gone completely now. Not filled with warmth exactly, but no longer frozen either. Just empty. Ready to maybe fill with something new. 6 months passed. I moved out of the Detroit apartment into a modest house in Lake Forest, near my father's estate. Nothing ostentatious, just comfortable. I learned to manage the hotel from a distance, hired good people, and trusted them. Started driving one of the Ferraris occasionally, though the Honda stayed in the garage too. Some things you keep for what they represent. Aria's disciplinary hearing ended with a suspension, not disbarment. 2 years without practicing law, but she could eventually return. She got a job doing legal research remotely, working for firms that didn't care about her past. Julian rebuilt his consulting practice slowly, focusing on smaller clients, being honest about his capabilities. They moved into a small apartment they could actually afford. Started therapy like I'd asked. I didn't hear from them for 5 months. Respected the boundary I'd set. Used the time to figure out who I was now, that survival wasn't my only goal. Then, month 6, my phone rang. Julian's name on the screen. Hi, Dad. Hi, son. We'd like to take you to dinner, if the offer still stands. Nothing fancy. Just dinner. I'd like that. We met at a diner in Chicago. Not the Grand Lux, not some expensive restaurant. A diner with worn booths and good coffee and no pretense. Aria was thinner, quieter, but her eyes were different now. Less calculating, more human. The conversation was awkward at first. Small talk about weather and traffic and nothing important. Then Julian took a breath. I've been thinking about what you said, about hope being cruel. I'm sorry I made you hope and then used it against you. That was worse than the legal stuff. I understand that now. Thank you for saying that. Therapy's been hard, having to look at who I became, why I thought it was acceptable to treat you that way. Dr. Morrison keeps asking me about Mom, about when she was gone and you remarried. I blamed you for so much. You had reason to. Maybe, but I turned that blame into permission to be cruel, to see you as an obstacle instead of a person. That's on me. Aria spoke quietly. I enabled it, made it seem strategic and legal instead of what it was. Theft, abuse. I'm ashamed of the lawyer I was, the person I was. We talked for 2 hours. Real conversation, not performance. They told me about therapy, about the hard work of changing. I told them about learning to manage wealth, about finding my father's journals and understanding him better, about trying to figure out who Rick Pierce was supposed to be now. When the check came, Julian reached for it. "I've got this," he said. "It's not much, just a diner, but I want to pay." I let him. Watched him count out bills carefully, adding a generous tip. A small thing, but it meant something. Outside, before we parted, Julian hugged me. Not the performed embrace from Chicago, but something real. "Thank you for the second chance. I won't waste it." "I know you won't." They walked to their modest car, a used Honda actually, and drove away. I stood on the sidewalk watching them go, feeling something unfamiliar. Not quite forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it, the possibility of it. My phone buzzed. Helen from the hotel, texting about a management question. The business of life continuing. I got in my Ferrari. Why not? I owned it, and drove back to Lake Forest. The house was empty when I arrived. I'd thought about dating, about trying to build something new, but wasn't ready yet. Maybe wouldn't be for a while. That was okay. Some things take time. I poured whiskey and stood on the back deck looking at the lake. Thought about my father's letter, about revenge and justice and grace and the distance between them, about whether I'd made the right choices. No easy answers, just decisions and consequences and the slow work of becoming someone better than who you were. The whiskey was smooth, the sunset was beautiful, the air smelled like autumn coming early. I had everything I needed. More than I needed. Money and power and options. But the most valuable thing was this moment, standing here, alive, not consumed by hatred or broken by betrayal. Just present. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. 1 year after the hearing, I stood in the Grand Lux Hotel ballroom watching preparations for a charity event. I decided to use my father's legacy for something beyond revenge or personal comfort. The hotel now hosted quarterly fundraisers for causes that mattered. Education, addiction recovery, family support services, things that might have helped us years ago. Julian and Aria were coming tonight. They'd asked to volunteer, to help with the event. I'd said yes. They arrived early, dressed simply, and got to work setting up chairs without fanfare. I watched them from the balcony, saw how they moved together now. Less performance, more partnership. The therapy was working. The change was real. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Pierce, this is Catherine Morrison from Morrison & Associates. I'm calling about your father's estate. There's one final asset we need to transfer." I thought everything was handled. This was separate. A personal trust your father established before his passing. He wanted it transferred on the anniversary of your inheritance. "What is it?" "A foundation. $5 million designated for family reconciliation services, therapy grants, mediation services, support for families in crisis. He wanted you to chair it. Left a note saying families break too easily and heal too slowly. He thought you'd understand what that meant." I looked down at Julian helping an elderly woman with her coat, at Aria laughing with one of the hotel staff, at this strange, broken, healing thing we were building. "I do understand," I said. "Send me the paperwork." The event started at 7. 200 people filled the ballroom, donors and volunteers and families we'd helped. I gave a short speech about second chances and the work of rebuilding. Julian and Aria stood in the back, listening. Afterward, as people mingled and music played, Julian approached me. "That was a good speech, Dad." "Thanks. I've been meaning to tell you something. I got a new client last week, startup founder whose business is failing. He reminded me of you, actually. Smart guy who made some bad decisions and lost everything." "What are you doing for him?" "Helping him restructure. But more than that, I'm being honest with him, telling him the hard truths about what went wrong. Not just managing the numbers, but helping him understand the patterns that led here. It's different than how I used to work." "Sounds like good work." "It is. And I'm doing it because you showed me what real help looks like. Not enabling or taking advantage, just actually helping someone become better." Aria joined us, holding champagne glasses. "I passed the bar ethics exam last week, officially back on track for reinstatement in 6 months." "That's wonderful," I said, and meant it. "I'm not going back to corporate law, though. I'm thinking family law, helping people navigate divorce and custody, making sure everyone gets treated fairly, especially the vulnerable ones. Your experience will help. It will. I know what it's like to be the predator. Maybe now I can be something else." We talked for another hour as the event continued around us. Real conversation about their lives, my work with the foundation, plans for the future. Not perfect. There were still awkward pauses, still wounds not fully healed, but real, honest. As the evening wound down and guests departed, Julian pulled me aside. Dad, I want you to know something. That $50,000 you gave me, I've paid back half of it, into the foundation you're starting. It's not much, but it felt important. The money came from grace I didn't earn. Felt right to pass some of it forward. I felt something catch in my throat. You didn't have to do that. I know, but I wanted to. Wanted to prove I understood what you were teaching me. It's not about the money. It's about being someone who gives instead of just taking. You're becoming a good man, Julian. I'm trying, because I had a good man show me how, even when I didn't deserve it. We embraced, and this time it felt like something whole instead of broken, like a real relationship instead of a performance. As they left, Aria turned back. Thank you, Richard, for not destroying us when you could have, for showing us a different way. Thank you for being willing to change. I watched them leave together, heading toward their modest life and their hard work and their slow healing. Watched the ballroom empty and the staff clean up. Stood alone in my father's hotel, in this legacy he'd left me that had become something neither of us expected. The revenge I'd planned had transformed into something else. Not forgiveness exactly, not redemption. Just the messy, complicated work of being human, of trying to be better than your worst moments, of choosing grace over justice when justice would be easier. I thought about my father's letter one last time. Do what you want with this information. Forgive them. Embrace them. Or make them understand what it costs to treat family as prey. I'd done all of it. The revenge that became mercy. The justice that became grace. The understanding that came through consequences and second chances and the hard work of changing. Helen approached with final paperwork for the night. Successful event, Mr. Pierce. We raised $40,000 for the education fund. Excellent. Thank you, Helen. Your father would be proud of what you've built here, what you've done with his legacy. I looked around the ballroom one last time. I think he'd be surprised. But yeah, maybe proud. I drove home to Lake Forest in my Honda Civic, the Ferrari still in the garage where it belonged, past the estate where my father lived his final years, past the buildings and businesses and lives that continued regardless of our small dramas. At home, I poured whiskey and sat on the deck. The lake was dark, stars reflected on still water. Somewhere in the city, Julian and Aria were building their new life. Somewhere my father was gone, his legacy transformed into something he never imagined. I raised my glass to the empty air, to fathers and sons, to failures and redemptions, to revenge that became grace, and grace that became healing. We're going to be okay, I said to no one. All of us, eventually. The night was quiet. The whiskey was smooth. The weight in my chest that had been cold for so long was warm now. Not happy exactly, but alive. Present, human. I'd had everything taken from me. Been given power to destroy. Chosen instead to build.